deep breath, taking a brave pill. I want to talk about bike fitting, and it's developed quite a bad reputation. It's been a bit of a snake oil industry, a bit of a scam, but there are some good stuff out there, and it's a really essential service. So this video is going to be about how to be bike fitted. You know, getting a bike fit should be a really positive thing, and a bit of that depends on you, the rider, being able to communicate with your fitter and find the right fitter in the first place to really make sure you get the most out of it. Bike fits now stretching to £250 for the consultation, and many people coming to see us having on the back of a bike fit are reporting spending sometimes thousands of pounds by the time they've brought new cranks, new handlebars and all of that. So yeah, let's get into this. Quick word about where I'm coming from, and that is, this is going to be dispensing some advice. I've been bike fitting now for a long time. I don't consider myself an absolute pro bike fitter. I've got one of those very practical applications. I like to consider all sorts of things and refer to people with much higher skills than me when I need to. So this advice comes a bit like that wear sunscreen advert by Baz Luhrmann, I think it was.
Be careful whose advice you buy, but be patient with those who supply it. Advice is a form of nostalgia.
So this is dispensing some advice which I hope some of you find useful. So the way I see it, there are probably 3 different types of bike fit experience you're likely to encounter. The first is probably what you've seen on YouTube, on GCN show and stuff, and that is like the big box retailer, big branded area inside of a store, you know, lots of computers, machinery, looks really high tech, that sort of thing. Second is probably going to be an independent fitter from a specialist in their craft, like a physiotherapist or sports therapist, who's offering bike fitting as an additional service to what they normally offer. And then sort of thirdly is probably what we do, which is a bike shop who has a bike fitting area and someone who's worked there for a long time, who's got a lot of experience in riding bikes and fitting people, but also hopefully knows a lot of people. Bike shops are real community centres, and we often know lots of people that we can refer you to and that sort of thing. So I'm going to go through those 3, which one you should probably choose and why, and if you take them, what to look out for and what to expect, and how to help the bike fitter along as well, because there's definitely a dynamic between you, the rider, and the fitter to be very aware of, and that is you are going to someone for help because you are in an element of pain, and you're almost going to your GP, you're expecting them to give you a solution. Likewise, the fitter is offering a service and they feel obliged to solve your problem. And when those 2 dynamics come into contact with something that's a little bit out of scope, things can go a little bit astray through goodwill, but sometimes you just put the brakes on and take a different direction. And that's where I think quite a lot of bike fitting goes wrong. Not necessarily out of purposefully trying to mislead people, but generally a pursuit of trying to do the best thing, but just not stopping at the right time. So the big box retail, and fair play, this is normally a sponsored area inside a big shop. So you might have seen this inside the Specialized Concept Store, the Pinarello Concept Store, a big area like a machinery and computers and all sorts. Generally speaking, the person doing the fit is normally a retail employee, probably quite an experienced one, probably very good at their jobs, who's gone on some additional training, but probably not had any medical training outside of what they had at that bike fit. More likely on that fitting course, they've been taught how to use the software. And now the software is actually pretty elaborate. It's getting very good. Probably a little bit too good that we can trust it a little bit too much and almost get to that point where computer says you must have this, or rather computer says no. Problem with this is that you as the rider don't necessarily know what you want. So the computer, the machine can put you into a comfortable position, and then it's trying to find a bike that might suit that, but then the bike that might suit that might not actually suit the type of riding that you wanted to do. I've seen this. Generally what happens is that you go onto this lovely fit jig and go, oh yes, this is a lovely position, and then someone takes those dimensions and walks around the store and tries to find you a bike, and you end up with a bike that was definitely not on your radar, And that's because when you're sat on these machines, you tend to find this nice, comfy, upright position. You don't really imagine yourself in a forward, more aggressive racing position. So you need to go in there with like, how do I really want to ride? And not just go, oh yes, this is comfy, because I think that's where those sort of things come a bit unstuck. The other danger here is that they can start being very, very specific on things like crank length and cleat wedges, and the poor fitter can get themselves really, really tied up in knots. So, quick horror story of something that happened to us recently when someone just came in for a second opinion. They'd been to one of these fits. They were running 170mm cranks. It was on a size small bike. And they were just going for a general, like, I just want to make sure it's right. I don't really have any sort of major pain, but I just want to make sure it's all right. So they got sold 167.5mm cranks, so just 2.5mm shorter. Now, this size conveniently is not across all ranges. It only find 167mm cranks in like Dura Ace and Red and things like that. Anyway, they got these cranks, they fitted them, and then there's a little bit of feedback backwards and forwards. They put the saddle up to compensate, and then the computer was giving them other feedback, and they ended up fitting cleat wedges. And cleat wedges normally control your feet like this angle here, but they'd stack them in a way that all it does do was just lifting it 2mm. So effectively, at top dead centre, you got back to almost exactly where you started, but at bottom dead centre, at the bottom of the stroke, you were then another 2mm shorter. The customer was so confused what was going on, everything felt weird. We just removed all of that, went back to basics, basically adjusted their saddle height to be right, and everything was good. And they were lucky enough that they were able to take all that equipment back to that shop and say, do you know what, I really didn't need this. But that whole experience happened from the rider just being too trusting, and the bike fitter really, really wanted to help, but being guided by the software and not necessarily stopping to pause and go, what have I just done? So approach with caution. It can be really, really good, especially if you don't have a bike and you're trying to get set up, because you can sit on a jig and get put into position and try lots of different things. But if you're going to go down that route, really have in your mind eye that riding position that you want, because it's very, very easy to be steered towards a more relaxed position when probably what you wanted was something a bit more aggressive. The next one is probably the next stage. People have already had a bike fit at a bike shop or one of these big places and it hasn't been quite right, or you're experiencing pain. That's when you go and seek out a real professional. So there's normally, in most towns, there's a physiotherapist who will offer bike fitting as a bit of a sideline. It might be sort of be down their sort of table, their menu of what it is that they offer, but they'll generally try and do it. There are also some physiotherapists that only specialised in bike fitting. In fact, Phil Burt is a fantastic example, where their passion for cycling has accelerated beyond their passion for physiotherapy, and the two become an absolutely fantastic combination, if you like, of skills. And they're the ones that really, really seek and find. These experiences can range. So from a physiotherapist who's kind of set up a turbo trainer in the corner and gives it a bit of a go, to someone who's got all of the equipment and is really, really specialised. You're not really going to know until you get there, potentially. So, and it's not to say that the person with the turbo trainer in the corner is definitely going to be bad, and the person with all the gear and no idea is going to be good, but it's definitely something to look out for. You see, if you are just going to find yourself in a position where you're using your bike on someone's turbo trainer, but they don't have things like stem sizes and cleat wedges and changing out your stem, or different handlebars to try, or different saddles to try, you're not going to get very far. And this is what we see, is people who have been for that sort of fit and they come out of that fit with just a list. So the physiotherapist hasn't done anything to their bike. They've said, we recommend a stem that's 1 centimetre shorter or 1 millimetre lower, or you get the idea, but they haven't actually tried it in the fit. They've just come out with like a list of recommendations. And then when we do the work as a mechanic, because a lot of the times these physios don't want to do the mechanicking work, they don't have the confidence to give the rider back a safe bike, they'll come to us, we'll do it and go, are you sure? And they don't know, because they've not had a chance to ride it. So just be wary of that. You do really need to sit on a saddle and try different things. So if your physiotherapist has got, probably at least 10 different types of saddle, I'd say is a good number to sort of have on hand. Most of the time, they'll take one look at your body and will go, you're probably going to be this one, maybe this one. It's not like you're going to have to try 10 saddles. We've normally got a pretty good idea as to what's going to suit you. Now, these fitters are worth finding if you experience any sort of pain. So this isn't just like, I want to be more powerful, I want to be more aero, or I want my bike handling to be better. You're probably not going to get that. This is when you have like joint pain that you can't get rid of through a normal fit. So this is normally your second sort of touch point, if you like, where you've already had a rudimentary fit, whether you've done that at home with an app or a bike shop or whatever, but you still have some significant pain. This is where to go. This is by no means a blanket recommendations, because we have seen some real horror stories come out of this as well. And again, it's not because people don't know what they're doing, but I do think what happens in this situation is that physiotherapists kind of forget that first and foremost that they are a physiotherapist. And what I mean by that is, if you were to present yourself to a physiotherapist without a bike with symptoms, they would normally diagnose it and treat it, or refer you to a course of treatment. That's the key difference between a physiotherapist and a sports therapist, is that a physiotherapist can diagnose. They don't tend to do much of the hands-on treatment these days. It depends who you get. Most of the hands-on treatment is either done yourself with a sheet of exercises that a physio might give you, or you go and see a sports therapist who might do the massage and the manipulation therapy. So going back to where I think things go wrong a little bit, and that is that the physiotherapist can sometimes get really sort of focused in on the detail of trying to make your bike the cause and trying to correct it, when sometimes you need to pull back, look at you as the person and realise that actually there's not much more I can do to your bike. I really need to think about you, your body, and treat you as if you were a person and not necessarily a cyclist. And that means maybe giving you some exercises, make sure you do those exercises, giving you advice on how to correct your posture, improve your core stability, all the things that they would normally do as a physio. And sometimes that really winds me up when people come out of these fits and come for us for a second opinion, is that like, did the physiotherapist actually sort of say, this is how you sit on a bike, this is how you correct your posture, and did he give you any coaching clues? Or did they actually give you anything that would improve your hip mobility, or even strengthen the muscles in your ankles or anything like that? Because that's what they would have done if you were a client presenting in front of them without a bike. And I think just look out for it, because it's one of the things that really sort of gets me, is that people have paid a lot of money to see a physiotherapist and they didn't get a physiotherapist experience for whatever reason. They got a bike fitting experience when actually what they needed was the help of an actual physiotherapist. So, okay, rant over. So the third type of fit I think you're likely to get is from places similar to us, an independent bike shop with someone who's been doing it for quite a long time. They've got really good knowledge of bikes and geometry, but also they've done a lot of bike fits with a lot of people, and they've probably learned a lot from a lot of people. So I know from my position, we've got a room full of sports therapists next to me. Several of our customers are physiotherapists who have some really deep and meaningful conversations with us, and I've helped on bike fits in the past as well. And all of that just comes into that melting pot of experience. But also I think this sort of fitter knows where their limits are, and will refer out, and they're normally very well networked. I know that we've got several people that we work with and network with when we need help, from osteopaths, podiatrists, sports therapists, strength coaches. They're all a relevant part in helping a rider ride more powerfully, more aerodynamically, less painful. You get the idea. What you're likely to get is, well, our setup is quite typical actually, and that is a turbo trainer. We don't tend to fit on a jig yet, something I want to invest in when I find the right one, but you might find someone with a jig. We normally use like slow motion video camera setup, so we can really see and analyse and measure and sort of track progress. We'll probably have a few physiotherapy tools like goniometers and levels and that sort of thing, just to check and check and check. And our background tends to be, we understand bikes more than we understand people, but we also, with a bit of experience, really learn to communicate and talk to people. See, from my point of view, I always think the best way to get a fit is to get a really good rapport and a conversation going, because giving feedback is really difficult, and trying to get someone to open up and speak to you is actually quite difficult, especially if they don't know the language, like how should it feel? Am I expected that my bike should just feel like a sofa, or am I expecting to feel like I'm doing some sport? What is that sort of feedback like? And trying to elicit that terminology out of people not familiar with it is definitely a skill. I think first and foremost, what you'll get with this type of fit more than the others is a compromise between your body and the bike. And what I mean by that is we've probably got a better understanding of how we're going to affect things like handling. You see, if you come too upright on your bike, then you make your front wheel very light and you take away some of that traction. Imagine, driving your car with a boot full of bricks. All the steering goes really, really light. A bike is exactly the same. I always think there needs to be a compromise between, okay, how do you want your bike to feel and ride, and how do you want to feel riding it? And actually, quite often, the little bit of pain a rider feels can actually just come from nervousness, just being nervous on the bike and having to hold the handlebars too tight. And sometimes if you can just give them a more confident, better handling bike, they would just tend to relax more. And I know that when I first started fitting, I was that nervous sort of fitter, and the client in front of me, and I just wanted to help so bad. And I just kept adjusting and getting feedback. And sometimes what I needed to do was stop and actually give some coaching cues and teach the rider actually just how to sit on a bike. Actually lean forwards, engage your core, hip hinge rather than just bend your back, relax your shoulders. And that's quite often how bike fitting goes for us these days, is we get you in a good position that's right for the geometry of the bike and what you're trying to achieve, but then also help with some coaching cues that when you're outside riding, it's like, okay, let's correct that posture, let's make that a little bit better. Can you stabilize your hips? Can you stop rocking on the saddle, not by making your saddle wider and wider and wider, but by just thinking, keep a nice stable core. And that's what the pros do. They're just hours and hours and hours of practice, and they become very, very efficient and very still on the bike. And a novice cyclist isn't there yet, and just bike fitting around problems doesn't help them become any better. Sometimes they need a little bit of coaching, to be fair. So with all of that in mind, you as the rider being fitted, you have to remember that you are not just there as a passenger. It's really, really important that you're a massive part of the feedback. And that feedback has to come with the understanding that you've really thought about what it is that you want, because you won't be able to get everything. Trying to say, I want to be more aero, I want a more efficient pedaling position, I want to be 100% confident after 10 hours. That is not going to come just from fitted. A lot of that's going to come from strengthening your core, improving your postures, doing Pilates. This is what the pros do. That's how they can do things like the Tour de France and ride hours and hours and hours, day after day after day, is because they've worked on all of that. So don't expect that a bike fitter is just going to just be able to tweak a few things and magically make you into a super duper aerodynamic, efficient pedaling and hyper comfortable rider. That doesn't work like that, I'm sorry. But what it is worth remembering is that in terms of input, you see the bike fitter, we can only observe. We can observe via slow motion cameras, we can observe with a very experienced and educated eye, but we can only really observe. We can't really feel anything. The only person that can feel what the fit's like is you. The kinesthetic person sat on a bike is the only one that can then feed back, which means that we need to listen. So that's our skills. Observation and listening are the only two things available to us as a fitter to get you there. So all the touch points are really down to you as to how you feed that back. So if you don't know what's meant to be right and what's meant to be wrong, how are you supposed to articulate that? Well, hopefully this bit will help. Okay, as a rule, you shouldn't be bleeding, blistering, or pinching anywhere. So if you are getting saddle sores to the point that things are actually bleeding in your shorts, promise you, I've been there, it's not pleasant. I've literally peeled my shorts off my bum a long time ago, and I've learnt that lesson very, very quickly. So that's definitely not a good thing. Same with blistering on your feet, that sort of stuff, that's definitely a no. We need to get that information out. We need to know where those hot spots are. We need to see if we can alleviate it. How long does it take to get these hot spots? You're probably not going to experience them in the bike feet, when you're only on the turbo trainer for a few minutes. So trying to gather that wealth of knowledge so that we can see it. It's definitely not worth going to your bike fit with, live sores. That's not going to help at all. So they need to be healed, but you need to be aware of where you are getting the problems. So sores like that are caused by a combination of movement and moisture, and it's the movement that we're trying to get rid of. There'll always be some moisture involved in cycling. You're definitely going to be sweating. Sweat's quite easy to get rid of. Like if you're cycling in the wet and the mud, that's harder. And sometimes you can actually just, wet yourself. I mean, I've been there on really endurance events where I've just, just couldn't go in time, and actually a little bit of urine in your shorts is going to cause some major sores. So triathletes, you'll know exactly what I'm speaking about here. But what we're trying to do in a bike fit is trying to eliminate as much movement as possible, which is why you'll see bike fitters slowing things down, seeing when your hips are rotating, where your hands are rubbing, what's going on with your knees, because that's what's going to cause sores. So definitely shouldn't be feeling that. I mean, if you've been sat on a bike for 12 hours doing something like Paris-Brest Paris, you're probably going to get saddle sore. But, if you're getting saddle sore after a couple of hours, then that's not right. Next up, joints should not hurt. What I mean by that, joints shouldn't pinch. So if you're feeling any sort of pinching pain at all, or like a rubbing sort of pain, that's definitely bad as well. We need to sort of identify that and get to the nub of that. And that's probably where you really need to see a physiotherapist or even potentially an osteopath, is to try and get that alleviated. Potentially a podiatrist if it sort of starts from your foot. Remember, there's a bit of a butterfly effect with a lot of this. So a problem that starts with your feet can actually end up in your hips quite quickly. So there's a few different skills here, and hopefully the professionals will refer out as they need to. Next one is sort of muscles being constantly under tension. You should be fairly relaxed with your muscles only contracting when they need to actually put a steering input in or pedal stroke. If the muscles are constantly under tension, that's not right. This is normally found in the shoulders and again, in very nervous riders or riders that don't have a developed core or good hip mobility, will tend to really brace and hold on and end up with soreness in their neck and their shoulders as this muscle is always under tension. Finally, if a fitter has changed something and you can't tell the difference, then put it back because it probably hasn't made a difference. And this is where we can get into a real pickle because annual bill can get really expensive because you might try something like, let's try some shorter cranks. How does that feel? Feels about the same. But then it's very rare that the fitter will take those cranks off and then put the old set back on again. They'll just sell you the ones that they fitted. Remember, the human body is actually quite an adaptable thing. We're not completely tuned in to every single part of our body. It comes back to the famous Phil Burt thing about being a macro absorber or a micro adjuster. And what we're trying to do now as bike fitters and coaches and physios is develop riders into a macro absorber. That is, they can ride a variety of different bikes in a variety of different situations and be pretty comfortable and perform very, very well. So maybe carry that information when you go into your bike fit. And if this bike fitter is taking you down a route that you're uncomfortable with, remember, it's okay to say stop before things get very, very expensive and start making very, very little difference. I think that's the critical thing I'm going to leave this video with, is that we must identify the point where we say, okay, stop, enough's enough, this is as good as it's going to get, I need to work on something else or take a different tactic. Okay, quite a lot of stuff in that. I am really looking forward to your comments on this one because what I've put out now is my opinion, my experience, my knowledge. I want you guys to share it because there will be people going for a bike fit that have hopefully just watched as far as this video, are very nervous. I want you to share down in the comments your good experiences, your bad experience. Get that knowledge down there because if anyone's about to drop 250 quid to £1,000, they would greatly appreciate the experience that you have to share. So open forum, get down there and help people out. All right, till the next one, take it easy.